The Council of International Students Australia is the national peak student representative organisation for all international students studying at the postgraduate, undergraduate, TAFE, VET, elite course and foundation levels. One of the key missions for the Council of International Students is to advocate and to promote the needs for international students among the stakeholders. And at the moment, we are looking at 500,000 of international students who are currently studying in various institutions across Australia, including universities, private colleges, English colleges, and TAFE. Navitas Limited is one of the largest private providers in Australia, which offers international education services for many international students. Today, joining me is Rod Jones, the CEO of Navitas Limited, and today I will speak to him about a number of issues that international students face and to get his view and thought about this. Rod, thank you for joining me today. The first question is really about the international education sector from a student perspective. Now, international education can be one of the lifetime experience for international students. And obviously Navitas has been a leading organisation in the private sector within the international education sector. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit in terms of the organisation's visions from a senior management perspective, especially for the international students studying at Navitas campuses?
Yeah, look, I think we've got a pretty simple vision, and that's to be the most recognised as the most trusted teaching and learning organisation in the world. And you don't just to get that, you have to earn that. And part of that's about ensuring you deliver to students exactly what they require to successfully achieve the outcomes that they want within the, but in our case, particularly the tertiary education field. And that's, from our perspective, providing to them an environment where they get the help and get the support and are able to, through that, successfully transition from where they've come from to where they want to be. But it's not with Navitas, it's in mainstream university as successful students. So we put a lot of effort into providing the right environment, providing the right opportunities, the structures around the programs that delivers that for students. Where did it come from? It really came from recognition that in those early days, international students were not succeeding at the level they should at the first year university programs. It had nothing to do with academic ability. It was all of the issues they faced around culture, different language, different education system, different way of life, different country. So all those things were a very big hurdle for the students to jump. And really what we did is say, okay, someone needed to deal with that on behalf of the students, and that's where Navitas came into its own and how it started its operations.
So basically what you're saying is that Navitas existed because there's a need among international students to have that kind of environment to ensure that they actually succeed throughout their time studying in Australia or even in other countries.
Yeah. It's an interesting organisation in that we have a real focus, as I said, delivering outcomes. And the way you deliver outcomes is, as I said, providing the right environment, but never compromising on the quality of standard of what you do. So when students go out the other end, they move into the mainstream university, confident, successful, and then are capable of going on and completing a degree. And that's sort of what we provide for international students, in particularly in what we do.
Absolutely. I think Navitas is certainly a very interesting concept because the way how it has been communicated to the students, especially offshore, is especially when Navitas runs universities program. And students may not necessarily know about Navitas, but they know about the universities until they actually arrive in Australia. They realize that this is a different environment, something that they probably didn't expect, but yet it's something that helps in terms of their adaptability and to actually have that integration, I suppose, with the campus.
Yeah. I think the beauty of the program is that it is a partnership with our universities, and so through that partnership we're actually delivering the programs within the university environment. So when a student arrives, they're not on a different campus, they're not in a different classrooms, they're still assimilated within the university, other than for the delivery of the classes. And with us, they're in again, as I said, in an environment where through small classes, extra teaching hours, backup English support, all those sorts of things, it's an environment where it's a soft landing, if you like, into the university sector.
I'm just going to go into a little bit more macro perspective from a sector's perspective. Now, we all know that the federal coalition government who got elected last year actually expressed their wish to actually repair the international education sector. And one of the things that they proposed is they wanted to have a demand-driven system. What is your view on that? And is there any legislation's perspective from Navitas in the sense that perhaps a reduce in the number of legislations and cutting red tape will assist, or how would that affect the sector as a whole?
Look, I think from our perspective, we see a real opportunity to reduce some of the barriers that do exist through, if you like, the regulation that is there. I think the government has taken a very good opportunity, and this is not just the current government, this applies to the previous government as well, through 2012 and the Knight Review and the things that were done there, to really try and build a sector that is conducive to the needs of the country and of the students. And I think it's been a very positive environment that provides not just to people like ourselves some level of certainty and security around what we do, but also for students. It provides them with a whole range of different things that are important to them. I think one of it's about protection of their the fees that they may pay in advance. So some of it's around, when they finish a degree, many would like work experience and the opportunity to do that. Well, the new structures and the new regulations allow for students to stay after they've completed their degrees for a period of time to work. It doesn't guarantee immigration, and unfortunately I think that was part of what drove many of the changes, but many students were seeing it as a shortcut to immigration and weren't necessarily genuine students. But for the genuine students, it does provide a real opportunity to get work experience. And if they do want to look at migration as one of their options, the option is there. And having spent time after your degree studying and working gives you probably a greater opportunity to get migration if you want it anyway.
I'm just going to go into migration in a second, and also the whole skill shortages and the demands in Australia. But touch a little bit on the quality of education. No doubt there's always a discussions when we talk about legislation, we talk about the quality of education, something that the Council of International Students Australia is advocating for as well, to ensure that international students have that quality study experience in Australia. Australia no doubt has one of the strongest consumer protection rights for international students if you compare with many other countries which offers international education. And we've reduced the numbers of legislations or the regulations that is supposed to take place. Would that affect the quality of the education from your perspective?
No, I don't believe so. I think you're right. Australia has been at the forefront of developing protection for international students. I think from an educational perspective, as we are in Navitas, to us, the whole focus of what we do is built around the quality of what we deliver. To us, it's critical that we deliver, the quality outcomes, the quality and the standards that students expect, and for which they're paying a significant amount of money, to be honest, and also ensuring that through that we deliver the outcomes they want. And that's, again, as I said, from our perspective, our key focus. It's not on money, it's on delivering success for students. And we're very much a supporter of that. The submissions we've made to government have been very much around how do we ensure that the rights of students are protected and the quality and standards are maintained. I think Australia is in a position where we have a very strong educational system, and in the main, and I'm not going to say it's perfect, but in the main, there is delivery of high quality education.
We're going to touch on a little bit about the overall quality of student experience and the well-being of international students, and a few of the issues which has been well recognized across Australia, and one of the most pressing ones is in fact the safety issues for international students. And in fact, since the 2009 violence attack on Indian students, in Sydney and Melbourne,
Yeah.
which no doubt affects the reputation of Australia being a safe destination for study. And when the ABC journalist Dal Irani just a couple of weeks ago interviewed a few Indian students in Mumbai and asked them about their reactions towards this matter and really how safe Australia is from their perspective. And we've seen a few number of mixed reaction, I suppose, from the Indian students. Now, do you think Australia as a whole and the sector has done enough in addressing this concern? And at the same time, how can education institutions play a role in regards to this matter?
Look, I think the starting point in this, I think in general, Australia is one of the safest countries in the world. I don't in any sense doubt that. That doesn't mean that the issues that were being raised aren't serious and important issues that need to be addressed, and that some of the incidents that were the incidents that have been highlighted didn't occur. Of course, they occurred, but in general, Australia is a very safe country for international students. I think the important thing is also providing to students that a lot of this sort of thing can be done through pre-departure and through when a student arrives, spending time in explaining what is logical for them to be doing or not doing. For example, would you go, let's take India, would you walk through the back blocks of Mumbai by yourself, independently of any, you probably wouldn't. In the same way, there are going to be places in Sydney that you wouldn't necessarily work through by yourself. It's not logical to do so because you're putting yourself at risk. But I think a lot of work that's being done, I think, like for example, what we do in our orientation, we bring the police in to talk to students about what they should be doing and how they can protect themselves from and not place themselves in any form of danger. And to me, that's really important, to give them the messages about what they should and should not be doing to ensure that they don't, as I said, place themselves at risk. But I come back and say that I know the government has been particularly concerned about trying to ensure that the right messages go out and the right protection mechanisms are put in place. But the reality, a lot of it does come back to the student themselves, not putting themselves at risk.
And which is challenging, given that especially students from offshore and what they hear from their friends or even getting information from particularly media can sometimes send the informations and the perceptions right to the face of the students before they arrive in Australia, and obviously without being personally present in Australia to experience the whole culture and also the environment, can be challenging for students to understand about the safety of Australia. Yeah,
people become nervous, and there's no question that what happened back in 2009, particularly with students from the subcontinent, was real and needed to be dealt with. But also amongst that was also a lot of, as I'm sure you would be aware, a lot of hype and that probably got raised to a level that wasn't appropriate. But it is incumbent on institutions. It is incumbent on government. If we are taking students into our colleges, we have a responsibility. It's not a responsibility we can abrogate to somebody else. It's a direct responsibility that we have to ensure that our students, as far as possible, are kept as safe as possible. And as I said, we can't be there as their guardian 24 hours a day, but we can certainly assist them in a whole range of ways to ensure that they don't put themselves at risk. And if you wanted to rate Australia as a risky country against the rest of the world, it's clear that Australia would rate very, very highly in terms of not being a risky country.
Absolutely, and in fact you mentioned about pre-departure, which I think is a very important part of the whole international student life cycle for study abroad. And what can the Navitas as a campus do in terms of perhaps improving that and perhaps considering some of the suggestions that has been discussed in the sector to do a little bit more in offshore, in the sense that before students arrive in Australia, to start familiarize them through some informations in regards to...
We've taken this on as an absolute imperative and something that we see as extremely important. And we're putting a lot of resources now into that sort of thing. For example, we are now moving. We actually having people in country, and part of their role will be to talk to students before they leave the country, to try and ensure that when they come, they're not completely. They have some understanding of what to expect when they arrive. It's very hard at times to get 100% understanding until you actually see something and experience it. It's only words. But we put a lot of effort in through the networks we work with, but also our own people that we are placing in country, with a key role being part of that, of their role there, of actually working with students and parents and delivering to them appropriate pre-departure briefings.
We're going to touch on the cost of living now, and which links to a very hot issue, the transport concessions issues in the state of Victoria and New South Wales. And we know that recently the government from both states has announced a certain discount system which offers students some sort of discounts, but not to what students expected in that full concessions, the 50% discount in whatever tickets that purchase. And it seems like this, from the Council of International Students' perspective, it somehow can be linked to certain aspect of safety. The way how we see that is potentially when international students are working and till very late at night, and some of them actually chose to walk back home very late at night instead of taking public transport. And one of the reasons for that
puts them at undue risk.
That's right. So what is Navitas' position in regards to the whole?
We've got a very clear position on this. So it's two states you're referring to, obviously, New South Wales and Victoria. If you look at all other states, they actually provide the supportive support in terms of the transport for international students, as they do for every other student. Certainly we have lobbied government on this from our perspective, that these students should be treated the same way as any other student.
The next one is regarding employment and workplace relations for international students, and it seems that this is also another big issue for students, especially when they actually log on to a career website like sic.com.au or Career One, for example, to look for some sort of practical experience, which is very valuable for any international education experience. And it seems like there are corporate practices out there which suggest that corporates and companies only prefer to hire permanent residents or citizens. Would that be an issue from your perspective? And what is Navitas' view on that?
I think particularly under the new streamlined visa processing and work rights that students get upon completion of a degree, where they're able to stay here for a period of time. And there's no question that students are looking for jobs. Part of the problem with businesses look at it from the perspective, are these potential students, do they have the potential to be long-term employees? And that's part of the problem. They will look for someone where there's some level of recognition that through PR or being a citizen, that they are potentially going to be longer-term employees. I also think part of it is there's always this uncertainty, which I believe is completely wrong, that international students, will they be able to fit, will they have the language to be able to work, to operate within the workplace? But there are things that can be done. One of the programs that we do run, which is an Australian government initiative, is the professional year, and it's very interesting. And with no doubt there is an additional cost there for students, but it's geared around trying to provide to students an understanding of what they need to operate effectively in the Australian workplace, from workplace English to how to work in the Australian work environment. And part of that program is a guaranteed internship into business. It's interesting to see that the students we place on internships, something like 60% get offered only a non-PR, or even as a PR. But it's again, what happens once the students get into the workplace, then they're seen to be good contributors to the workplace, so people tend to keep them on. So that's a very positive initiative, I think, and we probably offer about 50% of what's happening in Australia around the professional year. The other part of it is things like, something I know that we're working to try and develop strongly. Curtin Sydney has an internship system where we try to ensure that as part of their degree, the students at Curtin will get some sort of internship and work experience. And they're the sorts of initiatives which I believe are important. And it's about trying to solve this disconnect between students completing a qualification or involved in a qualification and being able to get into the workforce. And there is a real disconnect, and somehow we've got to bridge that gap from the perspective of giving to international students
and no doubt
opportunities that they really deserve.
And no doubt internship and also what often being discussed about, which is the work integrated learning program, are important to bridge that gap. But I guess one thing that really sparks the whole dissatisfaction among international students is the fact that the employers themselves actually stated very clear that we only hire permanent residents and citizens on their website. And I guess the way how international students see that is from an equality angle. And it seems goes back to the whole transfer concession thing. Why is that the domestic counterpart are entitled
I don't actually think it's an equality thing. I think it's more to do when people are out seeking new employees, they're looking for long-term employees.
So it's the uncertainty.
It's the uncertainty about, you're not an Australian resident, you don't have PR, which means that effectively at some point in time, unless you reach that goal of becoming a PR, you will not be staying in Australia, you'll be going home to your home country. So I think that's more around what the issue is rather than any sort of discriminatory bias against international students.
Next question, we talk about the migration law and also the skills shortages and demand in Australia. And obviously we have seen quite a number of changes over the last few years in terms of migration laws. And it is obviously a creation of uncertainty among international students. And we know that no doubt there are a portion of international students which comes to study in Australia mainly due to the driven demand on certain skills that Australia needed, which eventually leads to their permanent residency. So is this a concern to Navitas with that constant changes to the migration
I think
laws?
There was a need for a change. And part of the problem was going back into the 2007, 8, 9, 10, there was certainly a huge pool of international students who came into Australia and were never genuine students. They were never about study. It was about getting permanent residency. And there was a need to disconnect, in one sense, the migration question from the student visa question. I think the government has handled that very well in the sense that if you are a genuine student, you can come down, you can do your qualification, you can stay in Australia, you can work. If you want to go on and become a permanent resident, you can apply. Clearly, though, when you put it into perspective, what better migrant could Australia get? And Australia recognises this. With international students, they're young, they're well educated, they're educated in Australia, they've lived here for a few years, they speak the language, they understand the culture, they're the perfect migrant. So I don't think if a student's coming down there and looking for permanent residency as one of the potential goals on completion of the degree, the opportunities are absolutely there.
I think something that it concerns international students the most is actually the barriers that they have to go through to achieve that goal, which is to get a permanent job at the same time to get a residency status in Australia. Things like the language requirement through the English testing systems, and also a number of requirements such as the professional certifications, which obviously draws us to a number of challenges there in terms of the costs and also the whole preparations process that needed to be invested in when it comes to these sort of things. And would that be something that we talk about legislations and, obviously we know that Australia always need that skills in demand, but I guess that barriers that students have to go through is sometimes this, that's what challenges students the most, I guess.
Look, I think part of it is that the migration system is designed for all migrants. So it's not just designed for students, it's designed for people who may want to migrate from offshore. And I guess what they do is they apply the same rules, whether you're a student and been here 5 years or whether you're applying from Hong Kong or China or whatever. And certainly we know that in terms of the people who are applying from offshore, there is a need to understand and meet certain criteria to be able to be eligible for migration. The question is then, a student coming here for 5 years, are there elements of that we can say you've met those through being here and your degree? For example, the language requirement and the like. And the answer to that is probably yes. But what I do know with certainty that an international student, when they apply for PR, they have a far greater chance of getting through the process than many of the people who would apply directly from offshore.
Do you see student advocacy and student voice as a key role to play in addressing those issues that we mentioned about just now, especially in a private environment?
Absolutely. I think in raising these issues and putting them on the table and ensuring they get discussed. And you know, a lot of the stuff that you guys are trying to achieve, we see as important as well. So you're not advocating alone. We're basically also lobbying government on a number of these fronts.
Rod, that draws us to the last questions of the interview today. International education sector, no doubt, and international students know that it is one of the largest services sector in Australia, which often being referred to as an industry. But I guess the other discussions that came up from that is the students are concerned whether or not they have been seen or treated more as a cash cow rather than as commodities, rather than as a student, as a human being. Do you think that Australia has done enough alongside the sector and also the institutions to host or to continue to host more international students? Or the question simply will be, is Australia ready for more international students?
Oh, look, I think, have we done it? Did we do enough in the early days? Absolutely not. Have we improved? Yes. Are we where we need to be? Probably not. But I think what we do have, and I think it started with the last government, we have a real will within government now, and they're actually identified where international education fits within the spectrum, both in terms of the opportunities it provides to Australia, and you're right, there are, people see it as just driven as a cash cow, but it's not that. I think there's a whole range of opportunities, and through labour, through integration. I think the Colombo plan was a perfect example.
The new Colombo plan.
Well, the old one was a perfect example of the value add of international students in Australia. You go into many of the Southeast Asian countries in the world today, the leaders of many of those countries were aid students who'd come down to study in Australia through the Colombo plan, who have an absolute affinity to Australia and the linkages and the relationships both in industry and in government that have been developed through that. It's just enormous. I believe that's the sort of thing we should be trying to build on as a country, and so we need to be focused on ensuring that what we do for international students, they're just not a commodity. We have a responsibility to deliver to them what they are basically paying for, a high quality education and outcomes. And outcomes means it's not just a matter of taking your money and it's up to you whether you fail or not. Delivering to students what they need to get to where they need to be.
I think talking about outcome, it reminds me of one of the phrase that Senator the Honourable Brad Mason actually made when he attended the CISA conference last year. And he said that international students has placed their future in the hand of Australia. And which is very true, because you talk about outcome, what students have invested into is not just the education, but also to see that career opportunities, the graduate outcome, which is the ultimate goal for many students. Do you think Australia, the government has done enough in supporting that, and what can the government do, whether it is federal or state government, to help the sector to achieve that?
I absolutely think there's more that can be done. And one of the things this government has not really done in any sense is invest in the international education sector. It's really been left the responsibility to all of the institutions to do that. I think the government could be doing a lot more in that regard. Look, I understand, for many of the students who come here, it's the biggest investment many of their parents will ever make. It's to provide their children with the best possible education they can get, because in the end up, that's going to drive the opportunity for the children to be able to get a better job and potentially look after the parents. Because, and this is what most Australians don't understand. We have this very soft social security system where the nets protects everybody. In most countries through Asia, that doesn't exist. It's really the responsibility of the children to look after the parents, and that's why, from the parents' perspective, they're so focused on giving their kids the best possible education they can, and you know that better than I would. But the reality is that, you know, as a government, I think there's a lot more they could be doing to ensure that when students study in Australia, they are comfortable, they're getting absolute value for money for what they are paying for, and that the outcomes that they're achieving are going to deliver what they want in their future.
Rod, it has been a pleasure talking today, and thank you so much for joining me, and thanks so much for your time again.
It's quite all right. Thank you for having me.
Yes.